Straight talk from Israel. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
There's that song, 50 Ways to Leave. No, I'm just joking. 40 ways to leave your sinning before Yom Kippur. All right. Hi, everybody. You're listening to the Tamar Yonah Show here on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. It's after the 3 weeks of mourning and the Tisha B'Av holiday, where we mourned the destruction of the Holy Temple, and we are now, a lot of people are going on vacation, and it's time to kind of like let go a little bit, let go of that sadness, and we're approaching now the days of awe, which are the high holiday season. And we're going to be talking today to an author who's going to help us do that. So while many of us are physically attend high holiday services each year with the Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur holidays coming up, how many of us really feel spiritually prepared and inspired? The 40-day span preceding Yom Kippur, our author says, is the holiest time on the Jewish calendar, precisely because it was designed to help us find meaning, inspiration, and purpose. What kind of people do we want to be? And how can we feel more connected in the coming year? So we're going to be speaking to the author of The 40-Day Challenge, Daily Insights to Prepare for the holiday, for the high holidays. It's for people who believe that there's more to life than just the daily grind. The book offers compact Jewish wisdom each day for the 40 days leading up to the Day of Atonement, or the Yom Kippur holiday. Each daily reading is followed by a challenge question in his book, so it serves as a spiritual diary as you approach the high holidays. So this year, instead of just showing up at the synagogue, prepare yourself with Torah insights from the 40-day challenge, which helps you better connect to the people around you, make a positive change in the world, become the very best version of yourself, and connect to God at a time when He's closest. We'll be right back.
How did a nice Jewish girl from Delaware end up living in Israel? Shalom, I'm Natalie Sapinski. Join me on my show, Returning Home. Meet different people who have moved to Israel. Hear their personal stories, their highs, their lows, and everything in between. Each week, we talk to experts on immigration and the process of moving to Israel. Listen to Returning Home every Thursday, only on Israel News Talk Radio.
All right, we are back here at the Tamar Yonah Show on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com, and we're talking today about improving our relationship with God, improving who we are as a person, what our mission is here in life, and not to just show up at the synagogue during the high holiday season, but to actually show up with as they say, you're going to war, you want to be with your guns and your weaponry and everything that you need in order to really make an impact. And the book that I'm holding in my hands right now is called The 40-Day Challenge, Daily Jewish Insights to Prepare for the High Holidays. And it's a very easy book to go through and quite enjoyable. I enjoyed some of the stories in here that the rabbi wrote about. But let me introduce our guest who's going to help us come prepared to battle. And, well, that's just one word we can use to describe our improving ourselves during this high holiday season coming up. But we have joining us now Rabbi Mark Wilds. He is the founder and director of Manhattan Jewish Experience. It's a highly successful Jewish outreach and educational program that reconnects unaffiliated Jewish men and women in their 20s and 30s with Judaism and the Jewish community. Rabbi Wilds also teaches an outreach training seminar at Yeshiva University's Rabbinical School, training new leaders for the future. He and his wife, Jill, and their 4 children live on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, where they maintain an open home for newcomers and friends alike. He has recently authored the book, as I said, The 40-Day Challenge, Daily Insights to Prepare for the High Holidays, and we'll be talking about how to change for the better for this upcoming new year. So I want to welcome to the show Rabbi Mark Wilds.
So much for having me. It's really an honor to be here. And I'm looking forward to talking about the book. Thanks for having me.
Right. So it's a great little thing. Each chapter is only a few pages long. And so it's really easy to go through this for the 40 days prior to the high holiday season, to the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur. So I thought what we might do is just, quickly go through some of the chapters. I'll just read off the chapter name, basically, and maybe you can just give us a taste of how this book would be refining all of us who have it. So you start out with your first chapter called Second Chances. Tell us about that.
So, Judaism very much believes in second chances, and that's really what the high holidays are all about. And one of the stories that I tell there is about Alfred Nobel. We've all heard of the Nobel Peace Prize, but he was a Swedish inventor, actually, of dynamite. And there was this obituary for Alfred Nobel, but they erroneously eulogized Alfred. They were really talking about his brother Ludwig, who had actually died, and he made dynamite. And what happened is that the paper characterized Nobel as someone who had grown rich by developing new ways to mutilate and kill people. And when Nobel read the obituary, and it was really written about his brother, but it mistook him and had his name, he then realized, what am I doing with my life? He rewrote his will, and he bequeathed most of his incredible fortune to a cause that would be admired and celebrated by all, and that's the Nobel Prize to this day, which is given to leading scientists. And he was really given a second chance. And Elul is about a second chance. It's about giving the Jewish people a second chance because, according to Jewish tradition, the sages teach us that Rosh Chodesh Elul was the first day of the month, was the day that God told Moshe to come back to Har Sinai for the second set of tablets. You remember what happened when Moses came down with the first set. He saw the Jewish people sinning around the golden calf, broke the luchot, broke the tablets, and went back down, prayed for the Jewish people, and then 40 days later, God said, come back up. I'm going to give you a second chance. So that's really what the high holiday season's about. And that's why Rosh Chodesh Elul falls on the specific day that it does. It's not a coincidence. It's the day that God gave our ancestors a second chance. And that's the day that kicks off second chances for the entire Jewish people every year.
Yeah, that was a very powerful wake-up call and gift to see this obituary and then think, wow, so that might even be a good exercise for us to do, what would they, just to think, what would they write about us and what do we want it to say? Jumping to your second chapter, being honest with ourselves, that's a really hard thing to do a lot. Especially today, it's so easy, even just to, when we take selfies and they're all filtered and we think that we really look like that. It's so hard to be honest with ourselves. So where would you take us there?
So it's exactly what you said. It's hard to do, which is why I quote a famous rabbinic teaching based on a verse in Deuteronomy, in Sefer Devarim. The Torah tells us that that you're not supposed to take a bribe, because bribery blinds the eyes of the wise and perverts the words of the just. And the rabbis ask, why does it have to say bribery blinds the wise and perverts the just? Why not just say that bribery has the power to blind people and to pervert justice? Why does it say it impacts people that are wise and just? And I shared that because the Torah is teaching us an important lesson that no one is immune from something as alluring as money, not even the wise, not even the just, because all of us possess a good inclination and an evil inclination. And so even the wise and the just can succumb to temptation. And it's an important thing for us to remember that we're not in this alone. It's not like all the bad Jews, succumb to sin, and all the rabbinic saints, they don't do anything wrong. I mentioned in this chapter that the Chafetz Chaim and Rav Nachman of Breslev, two rabbinic giants who possess saintly characters, both admitted that by nature they were not easygoing people, and they shared how they had to work hard to contain their anger. And we never think of these greats as having personality issues, but we all do. So being honest with ourselves it's the first step in tshuva, in repentance, because if you're not honest, then you can't fix the problems, because we just fluff over them. Like you said, we want to look good on Facebook, we want to sound good, but come on, this is God. We can be honest because God really knows the truth.
What about people who say, well, I would, but this person is, and then the focus, the spotlight is turned on the other person?
Well, it's something I wrote about actually in my first book called Beyond the Instant. What I learned from Rabbi Jonathan Sachs of blessed memory, that we externalize the blame. And we do this because it's a defense mechanism. It prevents us from looking at ourselves. If we can focus on other people and their faults, that's a lot easier to do, than looking inside. And the truth is we can't change other people. The only people we can really change is ourselves. So by pointing the finger elsewhere, we're really just distracting ourselves from the real issue, and that is looking inside. And that's what the whole high holiday season's about. And that's why I wrote this book, so we can take a good look at ourselves, not beating ourselves up too much, but looking inside to improve.
So you called that to externalize the blame? Is that how you phrased it?
Yeah.
Externalize the blame. Very interesting. All right. Finishing what we start.
Yeah, that is really important. That is a challenge that a lot of us have. We start a lot of things and we don't complete them. I think actually one of the great accomplishments of the Daf Yomi phenomena, lots of people who weren't big learners took on to study a page of Talmud every day because people want a sense of accomplishment. And the Torah recognizes, I spoke about this in this particular chapter, that if you start something and you don't get to finish it, there's this lingering feeling of, I didn't do it. And it's a very important idea in Judaism. And I try to teach this to my kids. Don't take on something you don't think you can finish, and finish what you start. It's really something that ultimately allows us to become the best versions of ourselves. And that's why, it's one of the ideas behind this book. I tried not to make these chapters too long. I tried not to make it 100 days, but 40 days, so that we can have that sense of accomplishment when we finish something that we started.
Right. So each of your chapters are only around 3, 4, 5 pages. So they're really easy and to go through. But does that mean if we shouldn't start what we may not finish, does that mean I should never start the diet or never start exercise?
So it's a fine line. You're asking a good question. It's a fine line, because if you only start that which you know for sure you will, finish up, then you may not start certain things. Obviously, you have to take it with a grain of salt and do the best you can. But I think, many of us I think our lives are paved with all of these, with good intentions, as they say. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. The Talmud says famously, tafasta meruba lo tafasta. If you grab onto too much, you're going to end up with nothing. And better, I always say this to my students, most of my students do not come from a religious background and they're starting to learn how to pray. I always say less is more. Take 1 or 2 prayers from the tefillah and do them well. from beginning to end, feel good about them, as opposed to just grabbing all these tefillot and you come out with very little. So I think that's an important lesson.
Right. I was gonna suggest that maybe it would just be better to break things down into smaller parts, just like you said, and just say, well, I'm keeping Shabbat now. I'm keeping the Sabbath, but I'm going to from now on the Sabbath not smoke, or to break things down. So we
100%.
don't. So we don't just
example.
not do it because we think we might not finish it. All right. You have we have to go to a break. Everybody, we're going to be right back with more good advice. Don't go anywhere.
Shalom, everybody. Making a difference often takes just one moment and one person at a time. I am Orly Benny Davis, your show host on Israel News Talk Radios from Jerusalem with Love. You'll be hearing people talking about politics, religion, social issues, and making a better tomorrow. Join me, Orly Benny Davis, for God and Country. From Jerusalem with Love.
Wednesdays on Israel News Talk Radio.
All right, 40 ways to improve yourself before the high holiday season. I'm holding in my hands here the book called The 40-Day Challenge by Rabbi Mark Wilds, and it is chock full of advice here, stories, and easy reading, I have to say, which is pleasurable for me. Which are chapters are 3, 4, 5 pages long, each one in order to help us improve ourselves and be the people that we want to be. And when, as we say in Hebrew, ad mea ve'esrim, until 120, when we meet our Creator, we want to go with the best obituary, as our guest was talking about, that we can. We want to really make our life mean everything it can and use all the time we have and be the best people we can be. So we were going through the chapters, not every single one. We're not going to go through every chapter, but they're so good, these chapter titles, and so we're going to have you talk to us about that. We finished talking about finishing what we start, and the next one I wanted to ask you about was making music with what remains. Tell us about that.
So I share the story about the great violinist Yitzhak Perlman. I'm sure you've heard of him.
Yes.
And he once came out on stage, was tuning his violin, and one of the strings snapped. And it's a famous story. And instead of calling for another violin, he simply continued to play the whole concert on just 3 strings. A violin has 4 strings. And when he was finished, the crowd gave him this, incredible standing ovation. And when they asked him to speak about what happened, he famously remarked, "Our task is to make music with what remains." And I thought it was such a beautiful story because he himself, by the way, contracted polio at the age of 4. He had to wear metal braces. He was on crutches his whole life. And he knew better than anyone what it was like to go through life without that 4th string, so to speak. And that's what we all have. We all are in a situation where we don't have exactly always what we need. And Elul is this time of spiritual closeness. And the word Elul, if you spell it backwards, Aleph, Vav, Aleph, Lamed, Vav, Lamed, if you reverse the order of the letters, it spells a very funny word, Lule, which means if only, no. Lu means if only, lo means no, which means if only things were not the way they were. And I heard this from a friend of mine, Rabbi Eitan Meir, who lives in Israel today, and he said that much of the year we live this kind of Lule type of existence, right, where we say to ourselves, if only things were not that way, right, my life would be so much better. If I only got a bigger break at work, I'd have so much more money. If I only was smarter, I'd be further along in my career. If only I was better looking, people would pay more attention. If only. And then once a year, this month of Elul comes to us and says, you got to stop living this Lule. You got it backwards. It's Elul. Elul means you've got exactly what you need. What do you mean I have exactly what I need? I'm missing this, I'm missing that. This isn't right. That's not perfect. And that's exactly what we need to grow. It's a very important Jewish tradition that we are given a certain deck of cards in life because that's exactly what we need to get to where we're supposed to go in life, even though it's missing something, even though it's got 3 strings in the violin and not 4. And basically making music with what remains is our challenge in life. And Elul every year comes along to remind us that, yes, something is missing, but that's precisely what we need to be able to perfect ourselves. And this is part of a larger conversation. The great Ramchal, great 18th century Kabbalist, Rabbeinu Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, taught that each of us is dealt a certain deck of cards to challenge our souls in the precise manner that we need to grow. And those challenges that we're given in life are exactly what we need to actualize our unique potential. And therefore, it was purposeful that whatever it is we're missing, to embrace it and to live life as we're given it, and not a lule, if only kind of existence.
You know, I'm going to jump ahead in your book because you had a story there which I really liked a lot. You write here, one of my friends is an accomplished chess player. After years of studying the game, he was presented with the opportunity to play a game of chess against a bona fide chess grandmaster. The 2 players sat down, and after a few moves, the grandmaster said to my friend, "It looks like you're trying to capture my queen. Why are you doing this?" My friend answered, "The queen is the most powerful piece on the board. If I can capture your queen, I'd have a better chance of winning." The grandmaster looked down at the board, then back up at his opponent. He reached down, took his queen from the board, and handed it over. The grandmaster then asked, "Are there any other impediments preventing you from winning?" His younger opponent thought for a moment and pointed to his 2 rooks. Once again, the grandmaster removed the 2 critical pieces and handed them to my friend. "Anything else?" the grandmaster asked. By this time, my friend was too embarrassed to just ask for the king or for the knights or the bishops, so he just shook his head and said no. "Good," said the grandmaster. "No more impediments." And with the remaining pieces that he had, the grandmaster proceeded to demolish his young opponent. And that's exactly what you were just describing now with making music with what remains, using what God has given you in order to complete your mission or to do the things you need to do. And it was quite a humorous but poignant story that you wrote about there. So I really enjoyed that.
Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing that with everyone, because I just think it's such a powerful message of using what, that I called that entry, working with what you've got. And that's like a really, really important lesson, to raise our kids with and for our own selves, because whatever it is we're missing, God gives us something else. It's almost like a blind person, God forbid, is missing their sight, but they have an extra special sensitivity with their other senses. Their hearing is more sensitive. Their ability to feel and to touch is that much more pronounced. So, yes, we're missing something, but there's always something else that we've got to learn to find in life to really not simply get ahead, but actualize our potential.
All right, let's jump to the next chapter, Not by Thought Alone.
Mm-hmm. So Not by Thought Alone is really, I think, one of the most classic Jewish teachings, which is that we are the product of our actions. Judaism is mitzvah-centered. The famous French philosopher Descartes was trying to figure out what human existence was all about. And he wrote famously, he said, "I think, therefore I am." Like, I know I exist because of my thoughts. Now, Judaism, of course, celebrates the intellect, our ability to think and to reason. But the Torah also sees our humanity defined by our actions. I really think, and if you study the Rambam, the great Maimonides, especially his laws of character traits, it seems like the focus is on what we do, not necessarily or not only on what we believe or what we're thinking. Right? So a lot of people think, I don't feel like crossing this little old lady across the street. I'm not in a very generous mood right now. What's Judaism's approach to that? I don't care what mood you're in. I'm not concerned with what's going through your mind. The Torah demands, v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, love your neighbor as yourself. Just get yourself into the street and help this lady. Why? Because acharei hapulot nimshechu halevavot, famous line that your actions move the heart. We don't always perform what we do in life simply because intellectually we're thinking that or emotionally we're feeling that. If you want to think or feel certain things, you need to do certain things. My friend Tuvia Book is our tour guide on our MGE's missions to Israel every summer. He loves to say to do is to Jew, or to Jew is to do. I don't know, either way. But it's ultimately the actions we take that develop us into the people that we become. It's a very behavioralist kind of approach that was developed in the 20th century by psychologists like B.F. Skinner, but I think its roots stretch far back to our ancient Jewish teachings.
Yeah, I think we could add to that, the famous saying, fake it till you make it. I remember there was something I was doing this last week, actually, that I really didn't want to do, but I knew it was a mitzvah. So I said, you know what? For 10 seconds, I can do anything, right? For 10 seconds, I'm going to think how blessed I am to be able to do this. And I'm so happy to do it. And what a privilege it is to do it. And I just kept repeating it to myself. And, it really did make me feel better. And it made me like myself better. And, people like people that make themselves feel better. So the whole thing was just such a good experience just to fake it till you make it. All right, let's jump ahead. We only have another 30 seconds in this segment. Never sent, never signed, controlling your anger. Big one.
I love that story, by the way. That's Abraham Lincoln, who, when he would get angry, he would write these letters and he would sign them, never sent, never signed. It was his way of controlling his rage or his anger when he would get upset with anyone. And I in this chapter, I outline a couple of important things that we can all do to control our angers, because I'm sure we would all agree we've all said or done something really stupid when we were angry. Literally taking a breath, breathing slowly through the nose, out the mouth, actually helps calm us down. It activates our parasympathetic nervous system, which helps the body relax. And it's a very simple and useful tool that we can be using in any surrounding. And when you're angry, don't send that email. Don't make that comment. You can write something, but then let it sit for an hour. Share it with a colleague before you press send. Follow Abraham Lincoln's never sent, never signed letters. In our day, I think that's just before you press send. Show it to someone else or wait an hour. It makes a big, big difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can say in my life, I've learned that one of the best things I've ever really incorporated is to keep my mouth shut. So many times. Just don't say anything. All right. We're going to go to a break right now. When we get back, we're going to be going through a few more chapters here and also setting our priorities, because we all want to improve, and that starts with our priorities. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
This is Shai Bentako, and each week I'll be webcasting to you from Judea, origin of the word Jew, a people besieged and beleaguered in every generation. Nazi Germany's but a memory, but in its place the world invented the phantom Palestinians as this generation's internationally authorized Jew killers. Tune in for a different slant on life in Israel, Phantom Nation, every Monday.
Hi, I'm Rabbi David Aaron. The soul basics are the most profound, the most essential, and yet often the most neglected in our education. Join me for Soul Talk on Israel's News Talk Radio and discover the secrets to love, spiritual growth, and personal power.
We are in or approaching the high holiday season, and we want to not just show up at the synagogue, but we want to be ready spiritually as well. And we want our fast on the Day of Atonement, on the Yom Kippur holiday, to mean something, not just, okay, we did it, now back to the routine. We want to improve our routine. We want to improve our lives, and we want to be happy with who we are, and we want God to be happy with who we are, because he put us on this earth to to do a special mission that only you can do. Otherwise, he wouldn't need you here. And as my wise mother always says, if everybody thought and did the same, we would only need one person in this world, right? Okay, so we're talking with our guest, Rabbi Mark Wilds, and he is talking to us about his book called The 40-Day Challenge to help improve us as we go towards the Yom Kippur holiday. And we're going through the chapters in his book, and let's continue doing that. You have one here called What Are Your Priorities?
Yeah, I mean, look, lifestyle boils down to priorities because we all have limited time and we have limited energy. So we have to decide how and where we're going to allocate our precious resources. Right? What are we willing to stay up late at night for? What are we willing to wait in line for? And the month of Elul is a time to really determine our priorities and to what causes we're going to dedicate ourselves. And that's a very, very important idea. It's actually something that I heard in memory of Rav Aaron Lichtenstein of Zechat Tzaddik Livracha said something very, very beautiful. You know, we're supposed to do tshuva all year round.
That's repentance.
Right?
Tshuva's repentance.
Right? We don't wait for the high holidays to say I'm sorry to someone. We always are correcting ourselves. So he asked, so what's the difference between the tshuva all year round and the tshuva that we do on the high holidays? And he answered, all year round, we're asking ourselves, are we living up to our priorities, to our potential? Once a year, we ask ourselves, what are our priorities? What are our values? Once a year, we look at ourselves and we say, what do we really believe in? And that's why Rosh Hashanah comes before Yom Kippur, because Rosh Hashanah is not about asking forgiveness. It's really about determining what our beliefs are. We believe in God. We believe God has a mission and a purpose for us, like you were just saying, Tamar. And then once we get that straight, then we can say, okay, you know what, I didn't live up to it. But we have to first get that straight. Really important.
We certainly do. And I'll tell you, I've been learning Tanya lately, and I'm not a Chabadnik at all, but I'm really appreciating
I'm not I teach a class in Tanya, and if you saw, I'm not a Chabad. Tanya's unbelievable stuff. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
It certainly is, and it's really helping, set priorities and knowing who we are and what God wants from us, and it just makes everything so much more meaningful and purposeful. And you don't feel this anger and this sitzering. How do you say that in English? This like bubbling inside of you that you're not satisfied because why am I here and why am I suffering all of this and what's the purpose for all this pain, etc. So it really answers questions. But that might be another good thing. Maybe everybody should try to take a Torah class this year. And if you're in the Manhattan area, then contact our guest Rabbi Mark Wilds, and he can perhaps help guide you.
100%. You can check out any of our classes and events on our website, jewishexperience.org. Actually having a book launch. We'll be talking more about this book. Ilan Gold, who's a comedian, is going to be interviewing me, and also my student, who's a reporter from Channel 2 News in New York City, Lisa Rosner, is also going to be there. But I agree with you, Tamar. Everyone needs to step it up because you're only going to feel that much more prepared for the high holidays if we take on something. And I know I'm here to plug my book, The 40-Day Challenge, but you mentioned the Tanya. A great way to dive into the Tanya is to buy Chaim Miller's book called The Practical Tanya. It's a really great translation and guide to navigating that piece of Kabbalistic wisdom. It's also really done wonders for me. It's a lot heavier and deeper, I would say, than the 40-Day Challenge. But hey, it's a new year. It's an opportunity for a new adventure,
Right. And you got to start somewhere. All right, here's a big one. Learning from our enemies. Wow.
Yes. Well, you know what? We always learned a lot. Where is that in the book, Learning from Our Enemies? Help me out here.
That was chapter 11, page 40.
Oh, that's not a good. Chapter 11 doesn't sound very encouraging. Okay.
That can teach us something too, right? Chapter 11.
Should have put something in there, right, about chapter 11. So Amalek is the arch enemy of the Jewish people. And it's interesting because when it talks about how Amalek attacked the Jewish people, the language of the Torah is asher karcha baderech, which means that they met you on the way. But the Hebrew word karcha is also related to the word kar, which means cool down. And the karer is a refrigerator. So what does it mean that Amalek cooled the Jewish people down? It's simple, because the Jews were like on a high when they left Egypt. They had just escaped the most powerful civilization. They watched their oppressors brought to their knees, splitting of the Red Sea, and so on and so forth, the 10 plagues. And nobody would touch the Jew. Was untouchable, right? And they were passionate and enthusiastic about their relationship with God. And then Amalek came along, and they cooled everyone down. They took on the Jews, and in doing so, they really provoked God himself. And as a result, the nations of the world lost their fear, and the Jews lost some of their religious passion. Their passion was cooled. And that is something that we have to fight against. You started, Tamar, you mentioned at the very beginning of this interview that, improving our personalities is like doing battle. You use the language of weapons, and it's true. That's what the sages talk about, that there's a battle raging within us. And just like Rav Soloveitchik talked about gravity. Gravity is just the natural order of things, just drags us down. There's a correlation between gravity and sin. And when you improve yourself, you're literally pushing up against inertia that's going down. I always like to think of it like an escalator, right? You ever see like a going down escalator? When I was a kid, I loved trying to go up a down escalator. Drove my mother crazy. But that's kind of what improving is. Improving is like pushing against a certain kind of Amalek energy that's in the world, that's within ourselves. And we can learn that from our enemies who are just trying to cool us down and take us down. The only way is to find something that's going to make you passionate about moving up in life. And I like what you said before about picking a new book, whether it's the Tanya, whether it's this book, and doing something different, shaking it up. Not just showing up this year for the high holidays, but saying this year is going to be different because this year I took on X new mitzvah. I'm going to give some more charity. I'm going to study more Torah. I'm going to be kinder. But it's a specific activity that we put into our schedule, and we stick to it, and we finish what we start.
Right. I have this little poster on my wall that says, if nothing changes, nothing changes.
I love it.
Right.
That's a good title for a book.
So saying that, I always remember how, like, during the New Year for the non-Jews, they're making their New Year's resolutions. I'm going to lose 25 pounds this year. I'm going to, stop smoking. But when you have too general of a goal, sometimes it's harder to achieve it. So if we break it down, as we were talking about before, like this year, I'm going to stop eating Doritos. Something specific and bite-sized that we can really see. You know what? For the first month, I didn't eat Doritos. One time I broke. But you know what? Next month I'm going to do it. And sometimes we'll break. Everything is like, what do they say? 2 steps forward, 1 step backwards, something like that. But it's improvement. You're still going in the right direction. All right. We only have like another 2 minutes left. I want to go really quickly. The message of the shofar. We're or the shofar in English, but the shofar in Hebrew.
Yeah, so this is actually one of my favorite teachings, because it's a strange thing if you pull the lens back and you look at, we're taking a ram's horn and we're blowing into it. And I saw this gorgeous idea about breath. Okay, breath is something we create. God created us with his breath. He breathed into us the soul of life. And what is God asking us to do? He's asking us to use our breath to create a sound from this ram's horn. And I think that's a very beautiful idea. What are you going to create that's new this year that you didn't create last year? Because we are supposed to imitate and copy God. God created us with breath, and we're supposed to create something new with breath, symbolized by the shofar. Now, the shofar has all these other really beautiful ideas. The shofar sounded on Rosh Hashanah, and of course there's a custom to blow it every day of the month of Elul. But the Talmud tells us that there's this concept of nisnak l'orko pasul, which means that the shofar cannot be split down the middle. If the shofar is cracked, it's disqualified, because we too cannot be split down the middle. We need to project a clear message with clarity and conviction, right? We need to articulate what our goals and our visions for the coming year, and we can't be wishy-washy. Also, the shofar is supposed to be a little kafuf, the Talmud says, supposed to be a little bent over, right? That we don't appear before God as like arrogant. We stand before him like, look who I am. We're a little bent over. We don't have any arrogance. We don't have a pride. Humility is so important. One last thing about the shofar is that it's permissible, the Talmud says, for the shofar to be plated with gold. But the shofar is disqualified when the gold alters the sound. So in other words, there's no problem with having some gold on the shofar, except if the gold changes the tone. And I heard this from my teacher, Rabbi Schachter, which means that the gold represents money. And it's okay to have money. We need to have money. Money can do a lot of important things, and we can't live without money. But once the money starts changing the mission and the purpose in life, it starts changing our sound, so to speak, then it's a problem.
All right, we got to leave it there, Rabbi, because we're out of time. I'm so sorry. But I want to tell everybody that, again, the book is called The 40-Day Challenge, Daily Jewish Insights to Prepare for the High Holidays. Everybody can benefit from this book, and you can go to his website also at jewishexperience.org. Jewishexperience.org.
Right.
Thank you so much, Rabbi.
It is
Mark
my pleasure.
Wilds,
And you can get the book on Amazon. It comes right to you in a day.
Thank you.
Israel News Talk Radio's chat room. Just click the orange button at the top of the IsraelNewsTalkRadio.home page, log in as yourself or an anonymous guest, and join in on the fun. You'll meet other listeners from all over the world who listen to Israel News Talk Radio, and you can make new friends. Israel News Talk Radio's chat room. It's the closest you can get to being in the studio with us.
We love listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
Where can you get the inside news on Israel? At Israel News Talk Radio, we're dedicated to sharing Israel's inside story with the world by providing our listeners with news on Israeli politics, current affairs, and Israeli Jewish culture. The Israel News Talk Radio homepage also provides you, the listener, with useful information at your fingertips, with scrolling news headlines, weather, currency exchange, Shabbat candlelighting times, and so much more. Our radio programming is always accessible and on demand. We operate absolutely free of charge for everyone, everywhere. If you love what we do, partner with us now by becoming an Israel News Talk Radio supporter. With your support, you'll be inscribed on our Israel News Talk Radio Wall of Fame. There's nothing like us in the world. Be part of something great. Israel News Talk Radio. Straight talk from Israel.
If you love Israel News Talk Radio, then you'll love our Facebook page. We keep you up to date on what's happening in Israel, plus little surprise treasures that we don't share on the radio. Go now to follow us on Facebook. Just look for the Israel News Talk Radio Facebook page, and don't forget to subscribe and follow us by clicking on the like button. We post great stuff there that you'll want to share. Israel News Talk Radio on Facebook and Israel News Radio on Twitter.
News, opinion, and more. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.